Welcome, host. Welcome, host. Welcome, host.
Hello. There we go. Sorry about that. So frustrating sometimes. For whatever reason, we had to switch over the live page. So I guess, I don't know, I'm going to have to, when I schedule these events, figure out the best way to go live on that page. It's kind of odd. All right. So, anyways, we have, we got a lot to get to today. How's everyone doing? Thanks so much for tuning in with me on a Sunday night. Where's everybody from? I wonder. Welcome back. Thanks. It's great to be back. So we're going to be doing this on the regular every Sunday night because that's just when I have time to do it right now. But last week, got a lot of great feedback. Had over 1,000 views since last Sunday on the video, which is cool. I mean, we weren't promoting it or doing anything, and people just started checking in, sending questions. So I got a ton of questions to get to this episode. And just like last episode, we also have our live call-in number, which is right there at the bottom of the screen. What's up, Los Angeles? What's up, Michigan? Thanks for checking in, guys. So if you want to, you can call the bottom or call the number on the bottom of the screen, 775-204-8389, and I will talk to you live, answer any cooking questions that you have. Also, too, I thought it'd be fun to kind of Taiwan checking in. Nice. I thought it'd be fun to throw out a couple of topics of discussion that we can get to throughout the show. But first of all, I mean, one of the biggest stories in the culinary world this week was Mario Batali stepping down from his restaurant group due to sexual misconduct allegations. And when they asked him if they were true, he said, well, I can't really remember them specifically, but it sounds like something I do. Which, what a letdown that was. So, I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's much to say about that situation. I mean, it's nice to see some of the old attitudes in Kitchen get flushed out. I know Kitchen Confidential was a book that was quite influential with how people viewed kitchens, but most environments are a lot more professional than that. So tabloidish. Well, like I said, there's not really much to say about it. Don't really want to, harp on it. But there was, it did really send shockwaves through the culinary world. I mean, super, big name. Also, I just read an article on Instant Pot. I guess I'm the last person to learn about the Instant Pot multi-cooker. So, I don't know if you guys out there have them, but they look pretty cool. I guess it's like this new cultish thing. Someone sent me an email about it the other day. I was like, I have no idea what that is. So, if you guys have them, let me know what you think. If you like them. All right. So, our first... Oh, you know what? I forgot to open up, not one thing, talk about the 5 mother sauces. Well, what I'm going to do in the show notes is I will put an extensive link or extensive amount of links to the 5 French mother sauce resources that I have, because I've covered them quite a bit in the past. So I would hate to bore everybody with the recap now, but I definitely have lots of resources on it. The Stellar Culinary School podcast has a 5-part episode. I also do a lecture series. So we're going to hop right into your questions. This first one is from Matthew in Germany.
Hello, Jacob. Matthew from Germany here. I got a question for you about stocks. Ever since I've been listening to your podcasts, I've been cooking my own stocks, and I'm quite wondering, how do I know that the stocks I'm cooking are actually good? I personally cook the stocks mostly from leftover bones, cartilage, skin, and meat from when I make chicken thighs or chicken wings. As vegetables, I usually use onion, carrots, the celery root, because celery leaves are kind of hard to get here. In Germany, you can get in the stores, you can usually get instant variants of stock, but you can also get in some supermarkets jarred stocks. Either of those taste very differently from the stock I'm making, usually. I quite like my stock. I've been using it mostly for soups. American recipes usually ask for a box of chicken stock, for example. You can't really get stock over here in boxed form. So I don't really know, maybe that tastes different as well. How do I know that the stock I'm making is actually good? And how do I improve it, I guess? Thanks.
All the way from Germany. Thank you, Matthew, for taking the time to record a voicemail on the Ask Chef Jacob page and send it in. So, first of all, your stock is always going to taste a little bit different than the store-bought stuff for a couple different reasons. Number one is the homemade stock, it doesn't have any salt in it until you add it. The store-bought stocks, a lot of the times, even the low-sodium versions, are going to have some form of salt. And that salt is just going to enhance the flavor. But you don't ever want to salt your stock until right at the end when you're serving it. So, because really when you use a stock is a base ingredient. So what you're doing is you're taking that base ingredient, that stock, and you're making a sauce with it, you're making a soup with it, and you're reducing it down. So as you reduce it, you're concentrating the flavors in the stock, but you're also going to concentrate any salt content that you have in the stock as well, which is why you want to season right at the end. So just seasoning at the end is going to definitely enhance the flavor. Also, too, a lot of those store-bought stocks have hydrolyzed wheat, which adds umami, sometimes MSG, various different yeast compounds, all that have an umami effect, which will make it taste more meaty. So one of the things that you can do to get around that is you can add a sprinkle of MSG. There's nothing wrong with that. But you could also add some soy sauce. You can add some fish sauce. You can add mushrooms, and the more glutamic acid, which is what makes umami taste delicious, or what makes umami, that glutamic acid, you can find that in tomatoes, which is sometimes why you see tomato paste added to stock. You find it in mushrooms, all sorts of stuff. So that's number one. Is and yeah, Scriptonic MSG is highly underappreciated. It really is. MSG got a really bad rap. Unfortunately, we don't really need to get into the whole history of it, but yeah, a little bit of MSG goes a long way, especially in a homemade soup. And people be like, I can't believe you are okay with MSG, and say, well, do your own research. But yeah, highly underrated. But it's all about the umami, right? In those stocks. To answer the second part of your question, when someone says add a box of stock when you're following like an American recipe, those boxes are usually 1 to 2 quarts, depending upon where you're getting them from. So you can use your homemade stock most definitely, and you could also use a little bit of that store-bought bouillon if you need to for salt. So sometimes when I'm making, say for example, a chicken soup, right? I'm going to season that chicken soup or that chicken stock with a little bit of store-bought bouillon, because I'm just using that chicken base almost like it's salt, and it already has some chickeny flavor in it. So, and chicken base or just beef bases or bouillon bases in general are a great seasoning agent for a lot of soups. So thank you so much for the question. I greatly appreciate it, and hope that helped. So our next question comes from Chuck. Do you run your kitchens by the brigade system or de cuisine system? Or is it, hey, you break down these chickens and I need someone on the fish station tonight? Also, is the kitchen help turnover manageable or a chronic problem? So for people who are familiar or who aren't familiar with the brigade system, brigade means you have specialists in your kitchen. And more, the kitchen is cut up into sections. So you have like a cold section, a hot section, sauté, entremet, which is a vegetable section. You got a fish guy, you got a grill guy, and it's all broken down. And that's usually more or less how a lot of kitchens are laid out. Now, for the most part, they're not, unless you're in a really high-end kitchen, you don't have a ton of stations. You know, you usually have fryer, grill, sauté, salad, which is also called garde-manger. So for me, I like to personally cross-train everyone who works with me. I think it's very important to have everybody cross-trained. But also, too, there is stepping stones within their training. So most commonly, when you're working in a professional kitchen and you don't have a ton of experience, you start off as prep. That's where you get down your vegetable cuts, all that sort of stuff, and then you move into garde-manger, which is the cold section. After the cold section, you start to move up onto the hot line, usually doing simpler stuff where you're doing hot apps, or you're doing some sort of fried dishes, working the fryer baskets, working the flat top, and then moving on to grill and sauté. Now, as you progress in my kitchen, I want to train you on the grill. I want to train you on sauté, because ultimately my goal is to get you to be a leader in my kitchen, to be a junior sous, to be a sous chef, maybe even like an executive sous or a lead of a kitchen. So you need to know every single station in that kitchen before you can actually lead it. So the cross-training is really important, and making sure that you step people up each and every level is important as well. So although most kitchens are laid out like a brigade, and mine is slightly laid out like a brigade, I think cross-training is really important. And as people continue to learn, I get them to break down chickens, break down fish, and learn more advanced techniques. The more you know, the more valuable you're going to be. Next is from Eric. Eric says, I bought the Innova sous vide machine and I made steak. I guess it's okay, but when I dry it off and try to sear it in a cast iron pan, still doesn't come out very well. Maybe you might consider creating a video in your sous vide section. Yeah, we do have some sous vide videos posted. I can't remember if I have a steak video or not. I know I have some steak videos, or whether or not I did it sous vide, I'm not sure. But really the biggest mistake that people make when cooking sous vide is they don't allow the steak or the protein to rest and dry properly before searing. So your normal workflow is going to be to bag your product, and a lot of times I just use a standard Ziploc bag with a water displacement and cook it to whatever internal temperature I'm looking for. So in the case of a beef tenderloin, I'm going to cook that at right at 55 degrees Celsius, which is like a dead-on mid-rare, and usually about an hour and a half is what I'm looking for. Now, when it comes time to actually finish that steak, it's already at its perfect internal temperature, right? So you don't want to up-temp it. Any extra heat you add to that steak straight from the circulator will up-temp it. So what you want to do is you want to take it out, pat it dry on both sides, and let it rest. And usually just 2 minutes is a good enough rest. And in the meantime, have your pan screaming hot. Salt and pepper on both sides. Give it a nice hard sear, and serve. You're good to go. So what happens a lot is, number one, people don't dry the steak off enough, or the protein off enough, so they have a really hard time getting the sear. And what kind of complicates things even more is when you have a moist piece of protein and you have a difficult time getting that sear, it now needs to stay longer in the pan to dry out the moist surface. As it stays longer in the pan and dry out the moist surface, you end up having more heat applied to the steak, and it's going to cook it all the way through. Let's see, when should you start sauteing rockfish before it's fired? I'm not sure I understand that question, too. When should you start sauteing rockfish before it's fired? Before it's fired, it sounds like he or she's talking about in a hotline application. But for me, rockfish is a pretty fast cook. Sear one side, sear the other, quick butter based, on the plate it goes. If it's a really thick piece, it might need some oven time. But unless you're really cranking, you could probably sear and cook that to order. Weapon R. Stanzi via YouTube. I'll be curing and cold smoking most of the pig, and I was wondering if you can use the same principles of the equilibrium brining for wet curing. I want my final salt percent to be 1.7. I don't want it to be too salty when it dries out. So equal parts meat, weight, and water. Add 3.4% salt to water, and that's it. Most calculators are throwing out random numbers, and when I reverse calculate, it shows up being 3% salt in the meat, which is damn salty. One thing you want to take into consideration is any bone weight as well. So your equation is really water weight plus meat weight minus the bone weight multiplied by double what you want your finished salinity to be in your product for the equilibrium brine. So that's the route that I would take if you are going to equilibrium. Last time on last week's show, when we were talking about brining, equilibrium is fine for certain workflows, but for the most part, even when I'm doing cured stuff, I'll do a gradient brine, usually the 5% neighborhood. So, but yeah, your equation's looking fine. What you're missing is the bone weight. Next comes from Chef Lumberjack84 on Instagram. Hi, Chef. What are your thoughts on using a Searsall? As I just got one as a toy. Also, what would your best team building advice be? Something outside the box. Thanks from Canada. All right, so the Searsall, it's a great piece of kit. If you're one thing you have to take into consideration when using a Searsall is the efficiency workflow, right? So if you're using it to sear 12 duck breasts all at once in a busy restaurant setting, it's going to take a lot longer than if you have a couple of saute pans down. So if you're really cranking and you're really busy, the Searsall it's too much active time, right? So if I have duck breast searing in a pan, I can split up, say, 3 pans of 4. If in the example of searing 12 duck breasts, right? And while they're searing, I'm working on other things. I'm chopping, I'm getting my plates ready, I'm stirring my sauce, I'm finishing my sauces, right? With the Searsall, you're actually holding that torch in your hand, and you have to be directly over the proteins. It's really awesome for getting a super nice crust on a finished product, especially in the applications of sous vide, because what happens when you cook a protein sous vide, especially things like poultry breasts, the proteins coagulate when they're in the bag, and now the breast doesn't lay flat in your pan anymore, or even something like a duck leg that you cook sous vide or confit. If you want some extra browning on it, it's hard to brown that evenly in the pan because it's not a flat, even piece of meat. So it's not going to sear evenly. So a Searsall works great for that, to kind of fill in all the little nooks and crannies. It also works great for if you're doing something along the lines of a French onion soup and you're getting really busy in the kitchen. And so the cheese is melting. You're popping the soup tureens in the oven with the cheese melting on top. And maybe it's not browning. It's not getting that color that you want quite yet. Hit it with the Searsall, send it out the window, you're good to go. Coming in from our live chat, is there enough time to go online college for masters while working full-time on the line? That's from Cooking Hungry. Well, it depends on what your role is and what you're trying to accomplish. You can always make time for really anything as long as it's a priority, right? A very famous saying is, well, it's not that you didn't have time for it, it just wasn't a priority. So if your two priorities are cooking the line and then going to school online to get your master's degree, it can be done. Now, I assume that if you're doing that, you're probably just a line cook level, which means you're hourly, which means that they can adjust your schedule. So it's really just finding a kitchen that can work with your schedule. And I find that kitchens are always willing to work around the schedules of talented, hardworking cooks. So if you're a hard worker and you do a good job, people will work around your schedule. I have a guy that works with us right now that is going to college, and he's a great cook. I mean, I'd love to make him a sous chef, but it's just on his path. He has other interests, so he he makes time for it. So it can be done, right? What is your favorite cuisine to cook? I like everything. I really enjoy Asian flavors quite a bit and exploring that, but also too, I've really been getting into lately African flavors, Ethiopia, Morocco, and then going up into the Middle East. There's just some really cool flavor combinations, and going to culinary school and cutting your teeth in like a Western culinary philosophy as far as French trained, and a lot of the curriculum in culinary schools is based around Western cooking. It's just after years and years of that, I find some of the stuff that's going on in North Africa, some of the flavor combinations they're using in the Middle East, some of the flavor combinations they're using, fascinating. But I mean, that could be said for any international cuisine. South America has some amazing flavors. Australia, they're known for just some really obscure herbs and spices. Of course, you can spend your entire life studying the regions of China, and you could spend your entire life studying Szechuan cuisine in the Szechuan region of China and still not master it. So, I like it all. Next up, Uncommon Energy on Instagram sent in a question. Chef Lumberjack, team building advice. So honestly, the most successful team building stuff outside of the workplace is having cook-offs. I've had great success with that in the past. And, just throw a house party. Try and get people together outside of work and, have them bring some dishes over. You can cook some stuff, get some beer, get some wine, get the drinks that people like to drink and hang out. But trying to make time to hang outside of work is great for people letting their hair down and team building, but also to just holding people to high standards and making the high standards that everyone has the core that binds you together, or the glue that binds you together. Because then when you get through a busy night and people are happy and you guys know that you came together as a team and killed it, that's great for team morale. All right, Uncommon Energy, what are your thoughts on crispy pork knuckles? Love them. I want to put them on the menu as a special at the place I'm working. I got a sous vide setup, a combi oven, a Searsall, a flat grill, and the usual pans. I'm just wondering what the best method could be to get pull apart inside and bubbling, crispy skin on the outside. I was thinking low and slow, then blasting them to order. What do you think? Yeah, that's great. So here's the real trick for if you really want to get that bubbly, crispy skin crust on pork skin is boiling water is what's going to do the trick. And so what I've done in the past is you can either dunk it directly into boiling water for about 60 seconds, then remove it and ice it, and do that a few times. Or what I'll do as well is I'll just pour, I'll ladle boiling water over the skin again and again and again. And what that's going to do, so what what happens basically is the skin is full of collagen, especially in pork. And that collagen will bind to the fat. Now, you're not going to get crispy skin until you unravel that collagen into gelatin and you release or you render the fat. Same thing with a duck breast, right? So what you are doing is collagen starts to unravel at about 155 degrees Fahrenheit. So by pouring that boiling water over that skin again and again, what you're doing is you're exposing the collagen in that skin to really high temperatures that help to break it down and also at the same time render out the fat without cooking the interior of the meat. Now at that point, once you give it the boiling water treatment, you can go either a combi oven setup or sous vide would work. But so combi ovens, for those who don't know, are very precise ovens that use humidity or steam injection to hold an even temperature, because dry hot air is really poor at conducting heat. That's why you can reach into a 500-degree oven and your hand won't burn instantly. But if you reach into boiling water, it's going to hurt instantly. So same idea with a combi oven. You set the oven to say 160 degrees Fahrenheit with a little bit of humidity, and that humidity conveys the heat much more efficiently. It's almost like you're doing a bagless sous vide. So what I would do is, depending upon how many you think you're going to sell that night, I'd give them the boiling water treatment. Then I would pop them into the combi oven and cook them until you get it nice, fall apart tender. So you're probably looking at, 225 or 250 for 4 to 5 hours. You're gonna have to play with it, right? But once you get it to that texture you want, where it's cooked and it's nice and tender, now you can drop the combi oven into a holding cycle, and then I would probably bring it up in a fryer, because that fryer, that skin hits the hot oil, and you want to make sure you're using clean hot oil, and that oil should be in the 390 to 400 degree Fahrenheit range. Because what happens is that last little bit of moisture that's trapped in the skin, when it hits that hot oil, the skin puffs. Just like if you've ever fried rice noodles. Same concept. There's a little bit of moisture in rice noodles, or really any pasta. You drop it into extremely hot oil. The water turns to steam almost instantly and puffs the noodles. Same thing is happening when you do that with your pork skin, or the pork skin around the hock. Now you can also pop it into a screaming hot oven to order for service. But if you're doing I don't know if you're doing it for an appetizer or an entree. I'm just worried about the timing of it. You could also, if you're selling a lot of it, if it becomes a hit, you can sandbag it out a little bit, where you go through the whole process as described, and then blast it in a really hot oven, and then you kind of just hold them off to the side warm, and then you refire them right on the pickup. But then you'd have issues for the next day with retherming. Another thing you could do is you could play with bagging them and cooking them sous vide, icing them, and then retherming semi to order, so you have them just sitting in your circulator. Pull them out, dry them off, maybe dust them in a little bit of a fine starch, like cornstarch, or even Wondra, which is pre-gelatinized starch. It's actually really great for dusting items in. And then drop that into your fryer, and that coating of starch is going to give it a little bit of extra crispiness and keep it from drying out. So that'd be my approach. Chef, are you going to make new videos on YouTube about Christmas food? Yeah, probably not this year, just because we're running out of time. But, yeah, definitely, do a ham. Actually, if you guys follow Chef Steps just did a really awesome video on prime rib, and they did a really good job with it. So I would go ahead and check that out. chefsteps.com. Check out their prime rib video. All right, we're going to go to the phone lines here. Hi, who's this?
Hey, Chef, it's Robert from, I follow you on YouTube.
Hey, Robert.
I'm also listening in. I'm from Miami.
Awesome.
How you doing, Chef?
Fantastic. Thanks for calling. What can I do for you?
Yeah, so my question is regarding your school. I've been following your podcast for maybe about a year or two now, and I'm just now getting into the industry. I've been a home cook for about 6 years, but I'm just now getting into the industry about 5 months ago.
Okay.
I've been working in my first kitchen down here in Miami, and it's been a great experience for me so far. Working behind a really, really well-known chef down here, teaching me good habits and stuff. And my question to you is, I've been thinking about trying to possibly pursue a culinary degree and or certificate. I know it's not necessary, but I do in the next 5 years hopefully look to go into becoming a personal chef and then maybe into the private chef industry, and then the long-term goal maybe, of course, owning my own kitchen or running my own kitchen.
Okay.
How well does a culinary degree help an individual who's pursuing a career in culinary? And also, I wanted to know, is your school an accredited online school where once we finish your courses and obtain a degree, is it able to be used across the culinary field?
Nope. So I call my podcast the Stella Culinary School Podcast because it's meant to reflect how I would lecture in a culinary school environment and kind of work you from one lesson to the next. But the purpose isn't to be accredited. The purpose is to educate people. So we don't offer accreditation. And as far as getting an accredited degree, it really depends. If you go on the personal chef route, I doubt a whole lot of your clients are going to ask to see a degree. They really, it's the personal chef and then opening up your own restaurant. That's more built on the personal reputation. My biggest issue with culinary school, for the most part, and I get this question quite often, is the overall cost of it. So, for some of the larger culinary schools, you're looking at $60,000 to $100,000. That's a lot of debt to be taking on to graduate and then work for the next 10 years before you become an executive chef that's making decent money. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Chef, I understood. I totally agree. It's been my biggest challenge thus far, even though, like I said, I've done a lot of studying on my own, just shadowing amongst, the famous chefs around the world, the very well-known chefs, and partaking knowledge from, local friends and people who cook in my area amongst my city, and just being shadows to them. And I've been learning that way, because we all learn from someone else anyway. So I've just been trying to learn the best habits as best as most as possible. And I found your way, your approach to teaching, I found it to be very easy and applicable in real life. So that's why I kind of became steadfast in learning your approach to food, which is why I follow you, because I always like to ask the why question,
Mm-hmm.
and you give the answer to the why question without me having to ask,
Well,
and I think that's a big thing in learning.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's awesome, and that's why I started Stella Culinary School and a free culinary school before that, is because when I was coming up as a young cook, I got really frustrated by the lack of this is why you do it. It's like, hey, I'm telling you to do this, and it seemed like each chef I worked for had a different way of doing something. Each cookbook had a different way of doing something, And so I think to myself, like, well, what way is the right way? So you ask the questions why, and you ingrain yourself. Really, the best way to get ahead in this industry, besides just being a hard worker and having a great work ethic, is working for really awesome chefs in really awesome kitchens. Because it's not just the chefs, it's their entire team that will inspire you. You're going to have, meet some great cooks, meet some driven sous chefs, and then also just that never-ending self-learning, right? And being disciplined to go home and not go out partying, and get a library card and start just absorbing all the knowledge that you possibly can, finding resources online, good culinary forums to hang out on and ask questions. And a lot of it can be self-taught, but also too, when I, as a graduate from a culinary school, when I look at somebody's resume, I could care less if they have a culinary degree on it. If I know the chefs, either personally or by reputation, that are on their resume, that's what's going to make that person stand out. So it sounds like you're already working in a great kitchen. I would stay there and absorb as much information as possible, and then leverage the network within that kitchen to find your next job when you're ready to move on, and try and work for the best people you possibly can. And you'll find that you're going to climb your way up pretty quick.
Agree. Thank you, Chef. I really appreciate that.
All right, Robert, thanks for calling in. I really appreciate you. Have a good day.
All right, you too.
All right. Hello, who's this?
Hey, Chef. How you doing?
Good.
This is Corey speaking. How you doing?
Corey, how's it going?
Oh, this is doing great. I'm so happy I could speak to you. I've been watching your videos for a long time. Extremely impressed. I'm very excited to ask a few questions of you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for calling.
I have two questions. Maybe if you only have time to answer one, that'd be perfect.
Fire away.
Aged beef, so ribeye specifically, that I dry age in my fridge, which I know isn't quite perfect. But doing it, aged beef cook differently or quicker than fresh beef?
It does, because it has much less water, right? So as you're aging, one of the reasons why the flavor concentrates and is so delicious is because there's less water in the meat. So when you start the dry aging process, as the water evaporates, everything else concentrates. And when you go to cook the steak, you have less water to cook out of the steak, and that water helps as a buffer or as a temperature buffer. So the steaks will cook a lot faster. And are you using a prime cut of beef?
I'm using AAA.
AAA. I'm not familiar with that.
Also not too familiar. It's kind of what my grocery store labeled it as.
Okay. Where are you from?
I'm from Ontario, Canada.
Okay,
so
yeah. So you have
you
have a different grading system.
Costco.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So let me see. Is AAA supposed to be the highest grade, or?
No, I believe it's kind of like one of the higher grades for grocery store, but not necessarily what you would find in a restaurant.
Okay, let's see. Canadian beef grades: AAA, AA, A, prime. So it looks like AAA is right below prime. So what I'm seeing here is, unlike prime, AAA grade beef has only small amounts of visible marbling. Yet, like prime, AAA is a very high quality category that provides a juicy, tender cut of beef that is resilient. So the reason why I asked that is because really you want to have the highest amount of fat content as possible. So even choice. So in America, you have prime, and then you have choice right beneath it, and then some other grades that typically you wouldn't serve in a restaurant. And choice is like a pretty standard steak, unless you go to like a high-end steakhouse. Then you're going to pay the extra money for the prime. The reason why I bring this up is because you really need a lot of good marbling in your steak to be successful with the dry aging, because then what happens is when you go to cook it, you're going to have a much drier piece of meat, because there's going to be less intramuscular marbling. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
So are you having issues with how your steak is turning out when you cook a sous vide?
I'm finding it. So I'm sous videing it to about 54 degrees Celsius,
Okay.
and then pan searing it for about 3 minutes per side.
Okay.
But I'm finding it's coming out more medium well.
Yeah. What's the thickness on it?
About 1.5 inches.
Okay. See, that's the tough part with a ribeye like that. The hard sear on both sides for 3 minutes each. That's a lot of heat. So what I would probably recommend is how long are you letting it rest after you pull it from the circulator?
Oh, almost immediately, actually, from the sous vide.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
drying it off and almost immediately.
So that's your issue. What's happening is you're pulling it and it's a perfect mid rare to the core, right? And then when you as soon as you hit it with the extra heat, that heat moves directly inwards because the steak is already at the temperature that you want to eat it at, right? So as that temperature moves inward, it's going to up temp the steak really quickly. And 3 minutes on both sides is a long time. I mean, you're probably, if you didn't cook that steak mid-rare and it's 1.5 inches thick, if you're searing it, 3 minutes on both sides in a hot pan, you're probably getting into mid-rare territory by itself without the sous vide. So a couple of things I'd recommend is, number one, a much longer rest, and then ribeye is absolutely my favorite cut of steak. But I always try and find I try and find a thicker piece, right? And I'll try and go at least 2 inches or a 3-incher if I can get it. And I use that one steak to feed me, my wife, and my daughter. So and it's a lot more forgiving.
Okay, that's really great.
Now, are you dry aging the steak as is? Or are you dry aging like the whole loin?
So I'm doing about 2 to 3 ribs as a dry age.
Okay.
I'm willing to go about 8 weeks, and then I'm just doing it in my fridge. So I don't want to go longer.
Yeah, that's fine. I've done it in my walk-ins before, and it's turned out great. I mean, it's not ideal, but as long as you keep an eye on it. What I'll do sometimes too is I'll take a damp cloth if it's getting some white fuzzies on it, and I'll give it a quick wipe down. I'll damp.
I got a little meat chamber in my basement. I'm trying to get prosciutto going on. Would you have time for one more question? Is
Yeah.
that okay.
Yeah. Fire away.
The second one is specifically with bread, and I'm finding a lot of my homemade bread is very dense, and I'm wondering how I can get some more of those airy bubbles within it.
Okay. Absolutely. That's actually the airy bubbles are pretty easy. So denseness comes from a couple of things. It usually comes from are you doing regular yeast or sourdough?
Regular yeast.
Okay. So what you want to do is you want to use the no knead process. Are you familiar with that at all?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so look up. It's spacing me right now, but just Google search no knead bread, and there's a lot of like really famous recipes out there. Come on, chat room. What's the famous one? There's a really famous. Oh God, I'm just been a long week. The brain's dead right now, but I'll find it for you. I'll drop in the chat box. But basically, what you do is you use a very small amount of yeast. And then you let the dough rise for a long time overnight without any kneading. So you can create or establish a gluten structure in your dough by 2 main ways, right? Number one, by kneading the dough, and that develops your gluten, or by just allowing the gluten to hydrate. So the more you knead the dough, the more cohesive the interior texture of that dough becomes. It starts looking more and more like sandwich bread with even pockets. The less you knead the bread, the more open and airy the crumb will be. But in contrast to that, you need to let the dough autolyze or basically hydrate for a longer period of time. So in the standard no knead approach, what they're doing is usually mixing it the night before and letting it slowly rise overnight. So and if you do a Google search, you're going to find quite a bit. Yeah, Mark Bittman. Thanks, Scriptonic. So search Mark Bittman. I believe it was in the New York Times, no knead bread recipe, and that's usually the jumping off point for most people.
So after that night rising, are you re-kneading or just directly into
after the night rising, so the night rising acts as your primary bulk fermentation, and then you knock it down, you shape it, you proof for about an hour to 2 hours, till it's about 1.5 to 2 times its original volume, and then you bake.
Awesome.
And then if you're looking to get into bread making, have you worked your way through our bread videos yet, and then the bread podcast series on Stella Culinary?
I've watched a large majority of them. I haven't gotten into it yet.
Okay, I would.
Very, very good info.
Oh, thank you. So I would go to, it's stellaculinary.com/SCS. SCS stands for Stella Culinary School. And starting, I believe, episode 18 is where we start our bread series at. Yeah, the 4 pillars of bread. And we walk you through all the way up to episode 22, Let's Bake Some Sourdough. And it gets really intense. But all throughout those podcasts, we talk about, what different flour, how that flour affects your dough, the different kneading approaches, all that stuff. So should be very helpful in your bread baking journey.
That's amazing. Thanks for the tips.
Awesome. Thanks so much for calling in. I appreciate it.
Cheers. Have a great one.
Yeah, you too. Bye. All right. Let's go back to the chat box here. How often do you like to change your lunch and dinner menu? From Album. Change it seasonally, as certain items move in and out of season to keep it fresh, and then change it as I or my sous chefs or my cooks get bored with items, especially if an item isn't selling. But even if an item is selling, and if you're sick of looking at it on a plate, it's kind of goes against popular opinion. It's like if a item sells well, then you're gonna keep it on your menu forever. But sometimes your cooks just get sick of looking at it. Sometimes you as the chef get sick of looking at it and serving it, and because of that, your quality control on it just starts slipping because you don't really have the same passion for that dish that you once had. So when that happens, it's time to start experimenting with a new dish and replacing the old ones. So I never do complete overhauls. I switch up my ingredients as they don't become seasonally or as they stop being in season, and then I'll start creating new dishes based around basically what I'm passionate about at that time and in that season. Cooking adventures with a cookie. That's an interesting screen name. How do you evaluate cook time with sous vide? A lot of it is just understanding the times and temperatures. Really what you're looking to do is on tender cuts of meat, you're looking to get it cooked all the way through, edge to edge. For tough cuts of meat, you want to cook it through and also break down the collagen. In my Culinary Bootcamp workbook, which you can find on stellaculinary.com in the sidebar, I have a whole breakdown chart of the time and temps that I use for cooking things sous vide. And these are times and temps that I've figured out through trial and error, through research, and they're all times and temps that I use in my restaurant. And you will find as you research and learn more about sous vide, you're going to find times and temperatures that fit your preferences better. Like the 48-hour short rib was a big thing for a while. It's usually cooked at 140 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 degrees Celsius, and it's cooked for 48 hours at that temperature, and you get a medium doneness on it, and it's cool. And it's a unique experience to eat a short rib that's of a medium temp and texture. But for me, I'm more of I like the traditional, perfectly braised texture. So for that, you're doing 185 degrees Fahrenheit or 85 degrees Celsius for 12 hours, and it comes out perfect every single time. It's a beautiful product. So it's really finding what kind of textures and times and temps you're looking for. So I have a time and temp thing in this book, but as you Google around and hang out on various forums, mine included, the stellaculinary.com forum, you'll find people are using different approaches. Yeah, Scriptonic makes a good point. When we were talking to Robert, he says this field is all about networking. Biggest thing there is to never burn bridges, and that's really important. The kitchen can become an emotionally charged place, You see each other quite a bit. So sometimes you're like, man, I am so sick of just looking at you. You know, you drive me up a wall, but you want to make sure that you're always, cordial and polite, and you don't burn any bridges, because that's how the best jobs are gotten. You know, the best jobs are not found on Craigslist and Indeed, unfortunately. The best jobs are found through your own network. So get to know people, start hanging out with lots of chefs. Don't be that outcast hater guy that just hangs out on the edges and talks about how much better he is than everybody else. You want to network with chefs. You want to network with cooks, and utilize that network to grow your career. Do you prefer phone questions or chat? I prefer phone questions. I love it when people call in live. It's like our very own live call-in radio show, right? I mean, it's fun. So yeah, lines are open 775-204-8389. You can call in live, and I will answer your questions. In the meantime, I still have some more to blow through here. A gentleman and a cook via YouTube. I would really like to know how to balance flavors. It sounds redundant, but how would you know to go equal parts on certain ingredients as opposed to less on certain ingredients? Is it just trial and error thing? Also, can you speak about preparing for large parties, how to store properly, and how long breads, oils, compound butters, etc. Could last in the freezer or fridge? So the first part of your question is, how to balance flavors. I mean, again, not to keep on plugging my book, but just you guys are really lining them up for me tonight. The first section in the F-Step curriculum is flavor structure. So we talk quite in depth about that. But even if you don't want to read through that, and actually that section, the flavor section, is available for free download at stellaculinary.com. And in there, I talk about the importance of seasoning. I talk about the importance of using acid, using crunch. Another great resource beyond just kind of learning the basics of how to season dishes is a book I really enjoy called The Flavor Bible. And what's great about The Flavor Bible is you look up your key ingredient in your dish. And the way that I teach flavor structure is, look at when you start off conceptualizing a dish, you have what's called a primary ingredient or your money ingredient. That primary ingredient is the headliner of your dish. So it can be heirloom tomatoes, it could be a really amazing carrot, or it can be filet mignon, a duck breast. Whatever that primary ingredient is, that's what your dish is built around. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that every other ingredient that goes on that plate is there to enhance the primary ingredient. If it doesn't enhance the primary ingredient, well, then it doesn't belong. Now, a really good way to find those other ingredients that go nicely on that plate, especially if you have writer's block, ingredients that we call secondary ingredients, is the Flavor Bible. So what you'll do is you'll go and you'll look up, tomato, and in the in the alphabetically ordered Flavor Bible under tomato, you'll see garlic, basil, thyme, oregano, all the different flavors that go well. And what that does, it kind of sparks the creative juices. And you start thinking, oh yeah, it'd be really cool if I did a goat cheese flan and put that next to the tomato and whatever you want to do, right? And you start kind of working those ingredients into your dish, and you start balancing those flavors. Now, also too, a lot of it, unless you're following recipes, which as you continue to expand and grow as a cook, you're going to want the creative freedom to create your own recipes. You're going to have things on a plate that sound good in your head, and then when you complete the dish, you eat them, and it's just like, it's really kind of underwhelming, right? It wasn't what I was expecting. So you learn from it, you take down some notes, toss it in the trash, and you start again. So that's my basic approach, is download my free ebook, F is for Flavor, and go through that and kind of learn about seasoning and flavor structure. Then I would check out you can go to your local library and grab a copy of the Flavor Bible. They probably have it, or just go online and order it. It's definitely a book worth having. The Flavor Bible is one of those books that I go to back again and again and again. Even this far into my career, sometimes you're looking for that one ingredient that is just going to really snap something into place for you. And so when you're kind of banging your head up against the wall, you've been looking at food all day, and you just need a little bit of inspiration. The Flavor Bible is great for that. I love knife sharpening, if possible. This is from ABSC Paradigm via YouTube. I see many different ways out there. None seem to be for the casual cook. So I have a couple of knife sharpening videos. StellaCulinary.com/CKS. You'll find them there. But honestly, they're really not that good. I mean, they're okay. If you want to see some awesome videos on how to sharpen your knife, go to chefknivesTogo.com. And this guy sells knives online, but he went through and he made a lot of like really in-depth videos on how to properly sharpen your knives, and he does a great job. So I would actually recommend his videos over mine. And then if you want, you can buy your sharpening stones from him, or you can just look on Amazon and find something. But Chef Knives to Go, that guy does some great videos. All right, Eric is up next via YouTube. I would love to learn more about how to make smoked salmon at home and for restaurants, service, private events. How do you go about deciding on what to put on a menu? AKA, how do you serve, or how do you choose what you're going to serve? Thank you, Chef. Great to see you back. So, smoked salmon at home, pretty straightforward. I'll think about doing a video on that in the future. But if you Google around, you'll find some good instructions. Really, it's just a salt cure first, brushing off the salt. Sometimes they'll do a wet brine with it, and then you're going to just smoke it. You can do a cold smoke, you can do a hot smoke. There's a lot of different options. As far as putting together a menu and choosing how to choose what I'm going to serve, it depends. So like a standard dinner menu, I'm looking at doing a something that's seasonal, something that fits the market, something that I'm excited about, but also too on a professional level, something that my cooks in the kitchen can execute. Right? If the kitchen gets in the weeds, it's always the chef's fault, because the chef hasn't laid out the kitchen properly. The chef wrote a menu that was too ambitious. The chef didn't take into consideration certain weaknesses and strengths in the line. So it's really the chef's fault if the chef gets behind or gets in the weeds. So you want to write, because here's the thing, right? It's all about execution. You can have an amazing flavor profile and you can have an amazing product, but if you can't execute it in a timely fashion, if you can't get that food out hot and sauced and presented properly, then it doesn't really matter how great that dish was when you made it that one time, right? So I look at execution always. Outside of that, you want to look at seasonality, and then outside of that, you want to look at context. So again, if it's just like a dinner service menu, that's one thing. I'm going to try and give people a nice mix of appetizers, make sure there's some seafood items, make sure there's some vegetarian items, beef, et cetera, et cetera. Just kind of think of when you look at a menu that you enjoy, look at the breadth and the depth that it has, but also too, you want to have focus. You don't want a massive 30-page menu. Usually anywhere from 20 to 40 items is what you're looking for on a menu. I like to stay more in the 20 to 30 range personally. Now, if you're doing more of a specialty menu, like a multi-course tasting, then you got to ask yourself, well, am I going to be serving wine with it? And if so, am I going to be featuring a specific wine, or am I going to write the menu and then select the wines that pair best with each dish? So this can be a really intense and long conversation on the topic, but just kind of give you the 30,000-foot overview. Is you want there to be progression in the menu. So you want to start people off with lighter items and kind of work them towards the heavier items. And you want there to be some versatility in it. You don't want it to be flat and just kind of like the same thing over and over and over again. I try not, when I'm doing a tasting menu, unless that tasting menu's purpose is to feature a key ingredient, like featured truffles or something like that, I try not to use the same ingredients in any dish, right? So if I use an ingredient in my first course, I'm not going to use that ingredient anywhere else in that tasting menu. That helps to keep things interesting. So the progression is really key. And as cheesy as it sounds, it should almost be like a symphony, right? Where it's like it brings you in, it grabs your attention from the amuse-bouche, and then your entire menu, it should tell a story. It should either tell a story about you, it should tell a story about the time and place that you're in, about the season that you're currently experiencing, and write it from there. So that's my approach. I don't know what other people think. Let's go over to the chat room here. Java Mava, if you got a few questions, feel free to call in. How do you hire your staff? What do you look for? Bottom line, when it comes to hiring staff, I look for people who want to be chefs one day. And not like people who say, oh yeah, like I want to be a chef. That sounds like really rad and cool. Like I'm totally like I love food and I'm really creative. It's like, no, like you can see the fire in their eyes. They're hungry. They're passionate. They want to be a chef, right? So with that said, that's really key, because if you're not already inspired, you work way too hard and too long hours to be a lifelong line cook. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So if you want to be a chef and if you have a hard work ethic, then I can work with you. Outside of that, I mean, that's really all I look for. All right, we're going to go to Java Mava. Java Mava is live on the line. Hello, welcome to the show.
Hey, Chef. How you doing again?
Good, how are you?
Really good. So a question about stock, which I'm sure you're super familiar with. Recently, I've been experimenting with stock based off of, roasting the bones for about 40 minutes at 40 hours with the vegetables and whatnot, and cooking in the water for about 6 hours. And then I've also done one for 48 hours. And obviously there's a big difference between the two. Mm-hmm. And my question for you is kind of where do you find that timeline it is where you get diminishing return? What is kind of like the key timeline for stock?
What type of stock are we talking?
So I've recently done pork and chicken.
Okay. So with chicken, it really depends, because the way that I was taught and the way that I've done my chicken stocks for quite a while is you simmer the chicken stocks for about 4 to 6 hours, and then you pull them. And as far as from a effectiveness point of view, it comes out great. I mean, it tastes fine. You have a nice chickeny stock. However, as I do stocks at my house for my own personal use, I usually let them run overnight just because it's a lot more convenient for me. I usually don't have, I start my stocks after dinner and just let them go low and slow overnight. And then usually what happens is I go to work the next day really early, so I don't have time to strain it. So I add in some cold water. I keep it kind of slowly simmering throughout the day. And when I do that long extraction, you really get a nice, almost mineral quality to it. And I really enjoy it. So the conventional wisdom is to simmer a chicken stock for 4 to 6 hours. And I'm saying it's not always that simple. So really you should experiment and just see what you personally like better. Now, if I'm doing something if I wanted like a lighter dish, especially if I'm making like a white chicken stock and I'm using that chicken stock to glaze vegetables, then I'll blanch my chicken bones and have that white chicken stock done in about 4 hours, because I don't need it to be super intense in flavor. If I want to make a really awesome like roasted chicken noodle soup, then I'm going to let that stock go overnight.
Nice, really good info.
And then as far as pork and veal or beef, they have a lot more collagen in it. So not only does it help to run those overnight or for 12 hours, but also, especially with beef, to do what's called a remillage, which is a second wetting of the bones, where you strain off the first stock, throw the bones back in the pot, add in some more fresh mirepoix, and simmer it.
Oh, interesting.
And what that's doing is that's creating a weaker stock, but you're extracting more collagen. And And the collagen extraction, or actually at this point is gelatin, because the collagen in the bones breaks down into gelatin strands. And that's what's going to give your stock body, especially when you take it and you start reducing it. So in my restaurants, when we're doing stocks, I try not to use starch thickeners. We do full reductions, and it's that gelatin in those sauces or in that stock that will thicken the finished sauce. So the more gelatin I can extract from the bones, the better my yield is going to be on that sauce reduction, if that makes sense.
Do you have to worry about breaking sauces at that high temperature? Is it okay with stock?
No, because the reason why a sauce will break is because you have the fat separating out, which is what you want to do anyways when you're reducing a sauce or when you're reducing a stock, is you want to skim that fat. And what I like to do is I put the pot halfway off the burner, and what happens is the side of the pot that's on the burner, that's my simmering side. You don't want to really rip it really hard. You don't want to a rolling boil, but you want it up to where it's boiling up on one side, on the burner side. And then what will happen is it'll drop back down on the cool side and kind of create this convection heating cycle. And all of your fat and all of your scum is going to collect on one side of the pot, and you just skim it. And you just constantly, every, say, 20 to 60 minutes, you check your stock, and as it's reducing, you just give it a quick little skim to remove that fat, and then, you're good to go. And then usually at the end of the process, sometimes you want to finish with a little bit of fat and stir that in right at the end, right? So I'll take and you can check out our pan reduction videos that we have, stellarculinary.com/SNS. SNS stands for sauces and soups. And we do a full reduction pan sauce there. And at the end, you see me turn off the flame and just swirl in the butter. And that butter adds some mouthfeel, but because my sauce is no longer simmering, that butter emulsifies in, gives the sauce a nice sheen, and then you serve it immediately.
Wow. That sounds amazing. Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, fire away.
Okay, so I've been getting into deep fried chicken recently. You take your chicken, you get 8 or 10 servings per chicken. I'm having issues with my crust getting too crispy and the inside of my chicken not cooking all the way.
Okay, what are you using for your breading?
So I'm using basic flour, just dredging in flour, a little bit of extra egg in there to kind of clump it up a bit. And then I have salt and cayenne and a few flavors in there.
And are you adding the egg directly to the flour?
No, second initial egg bath and then into the flour. And my chicken is kind of pickling. I do a pickle juice that I set it in for about an hour or two, and then I put it into the egg and then into the flour. Okay,
so and what temperature are you frying it at?
I'm trying to maintain 350.
Okay.
I'm using a Dutch oven, so sometimes it's kind of variable.
Okay. 350 is usually the temp that you want. Depending upon the size of your chicken, it might be a little bit too high. A couple of things that you can look at is, so when it's browning like that, what's happening is it's actually mainly the protein in the flours that's browning. And the starch will brown eventually as well, but at a much higher temperature. So what I like to do is I like to cut my flour usually with rice flour and also with cornstarch. So I'll use about a third all-purpose flour, a third rice flour, and a third cornstarch. And the pure starch from the cornstarch actually slows down the browning process and keeps it from burning. Also, too, sometimes as you're going and you're frying the chicken and you know it's not going to finish all the way through, it's just browning too quickly. I keep my oven on when I'm making fried chicken, and if I have to, I'll remove it from the oil, drop it onto a wire rack with a sheet pan underneath it, and I'll just finish it in the oven. And it really does come out just as good.
That's a great idea. My chicken wings are fabulous. I wish you could try them. But
awesome.
My fried chicken is a little too burnt.
Well, give it a shot. Try playing with the cornstarch in the dredge, and see how it comes out. You can try dropping your fryer temperature a little bit, but also too, honestly, instead of standing over the pot, just trying to make it perfect and have that perfect temperature, I usually just fry my chicken till it's a nice, beautiful golden brown, and then finish it in the oven and just probe it with a thermometer and pull it when it's like right at 155.
Perfect idea. Thank you, Chef.
You got it. Thanks for calling in. I appreciate it.
Cheers.
All right, bye. All right, we got some more questions in the chat box. Cat Weasel, is there a more stable alternative to potato starch? I'm not really sure what you mean by stable. If you can go ahead and drop in a little extra descriptor there, what you're looking to do with it. If your labor costs are running high, what measures do you take to control it? Same question, but for food costs. So, labor cost is a little bit more complex than food cost. Really, if cross-utilization of product is key in running a good food cost, having a menu that sells well and sells evenly is really key. And using all of your waste product, not throwing anything in the trash. So we talked a lot about this last week on the show, talking about how when you trim down a beef tenderloin, you want to make sure you're using that scrap for some grind. You're using some of that scrap to dice up for your steak tartare. That's very important. Labor cost is a little bit different because you always have what's called a minimum staffing level, or you have a break-even point. So here's the thing, right? Depending upon the size of your restaurant and the size of your kitchen, your minimal staffing point might be 3 cooks plus a dishwasher. Because if you have a 120-seat restaurant, at any given time, you can have that restaurant fill up. So it's really hard to have a large restaurant. And if you're not a really popular place, it's tough to run a clean labor cost. Also, depending upon how your kitchen is laid out. If your kitchen is a big, wide, long kitchen, and all the stations are separate, it's hard to scale down from that 3-person to 1-person to 2 people, right? So if I got to run all the way over to the other side of the kitchen every time to make a salad, and then run back over to the saute station to fire entrees, and I start getting a hit, it's really difficult to stay up and to get the food out within a good time frame. So what I recommend doing, which is outside the scope of this broadcast, is run what's called a break-even analysis. And a break-even analysis will tell you how much covers, or how many covers, or what amount of sales you need to do to break even, to not lose money. And if you look at your break-even point and it says you need to do 30 covers to break even, and you're doing 20 covers a day, well then, you should look at your costs and your expenses and see if there's a way to not only drop that, but also to bring in more people. So in one of the restaurants I oversee right now, our minimum staffing level is 3 for dinner service. Now, I need those 3 people to efficiently do 50 covers because, again, those 50 covers aren't spread out evenly and magically throughout the entire night. Those 50 covers, they're all coming in at 7 o'clock, and they all want to eat at the exact same time. So with those 3 people, I need them there to do 50 covers. But also, those exact same 3 people can do double that amount. They can do 100 covers. So as you bring in more people and your labor becomes a lot more, or as you bring in more customers, your labor becomes a lot more efficient. So look at your break-even analysis, food costs, just look at your waste, and then make sure you're pricing your items appropriately. And you should be tracking how much you spend on food on a daily basis, and you should be tracking your food sales on a daily basis. So as that your food cost starts to climb throughout the month, right? And you're not getting in a situation where your food cost is extremely high and you don't know until you close out the month. You want to be able to realize your food cost is way too high early on. All right, so you got to do daily tracking. I get enough of these questions to where I'm going to need to put together a resource on the business side of running kitchens, break-even points, food costs, labor costs. So I'll be working on some of that stuff. It's time to start dabbling in those areas. But also, too, when I get these, you're not the first person to ask this question, and you're definitely not going to be the last. So as we get more and more of these questions, I want to be able to point them towards a resource. So that's something at the top of my list to do. All right, so Cat Weasel responded, says using it to thicken a ketchup-based sauce, but when refrigerated, it retrogrades fairly fast. Is there a more longer, stable alternative? It depends on how. It depends on how thick it needs to be. Xanthan gum works to kind of hold a sauce together and keep it from breaking, and also add a little bit of thickness. But if you use too much xanthan gum, it kind of gives it that weird snotty texture. Also, cornstarch tends to work great for those applications. I'm not really sure how long you want to store it for. If you want Cat Weasel, you can go ahead and shoot me an email, jacob@stellaculinary.com. Shoot me an email with your recipe in it, and I'd be happy to take a look at it for you, because there's a lot of variables depending upon what you have, how thick you want it to be, how long you want to store under refrigeration, and so we could go back and forth on this topic for the next 15 minutes, boring everybody in the chat room as I'm waiting for the delay to kick through and for you to reply. So shoot me that email, and I'd be happy to get back to you on that and help you out. Trav for Oilers, when to back away from traditional methods and recipes, and when to stay with the classics and put a simple twist or refinement into it. Really, it's about being genuine to yourself and your creative spirit. So if you have a modern twist on something and it's genuine and it works and you love it and you think it's great, then do it. The classics are the classics for the reason, but also, too, you should always be putting some sort of twist on the classics. But really, you should be creating your own dishes as well. So, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be super modern, but take a classic technique or a classic recipe and make it your own, right? Make it speak to you. When somebody looks at your menu and reads your menu, they should know that it's your menu. When they taste your food, they should know that it's your food. It should taste unique. And that's one of the great parts about being a chef, is you get to express who you are as a person through your food and the environment that you create in your restaurant. So it becomes very personal. It also becomes very personal when people decide they don't like that dish. It's like, that's my baby. I put so much work into it. I love it. And you hate it, and you hate me, and which isn't the case, So I always like to use classic recipes as a jumping off point. When I get bored, I go back, I flip through, some Escoffier, some old school cookbooks, and you're like, oh, that's really cool what he did with the pigeon or that sauce. I'm going to use it as a jumping off point and make it my own. I'm going to put this little twist here, that little twist there. But all that stuff sort of comes with time. Legit via YouTube says, I like to know what do you look for in a good sous chef? Well, there's a lot of things. First of all, a good sous chef is your workhorse. They're your number one soldier in the kitchen. They're the person that is gonna get it done when it needs to be done. They also are leaders that can lead and train and help you educate your staff. And most importantly, they can run the restaurant while you're not there, as if you were there. And that's the keyest part of a sous is, the chef has to have days off every now and then. How do you think I'm doing this podcast right now? Well, because it's my day off, and I got an awesome sous chef at the restaurant right now running it as if I was there, right? So I'm looking for someone with an amazing work ethic, someone who I don't have to worry about snapping on me under the pressure, someone who works well under pressure, but also an extremely driven individual that's self-driven. I don't have to give them a pep talk every day. I don't have to walk in the door and tell them what to do and give them a list of things that they should be doing. They are proactive individuals. Now, if you're a cook that's looking to make the leap to a sous chef, that next step up, then you want to be proactive. Come in your free time and learn a station. If you're working garde manger, right, come in an hour early and help the sauté guy set up. You think the saute guy is gonna bitch and moan because he's getting a free hand from a garde manger guy? No, absolutely not. He's gonna love it, and you're gonna start learning the prep and learning how that station is set up. And then after you get all the salads out, you can look and see what the saute guy is doing, because once your salads are gone, everyone's eating their entrees. Then you could ask the saute guy, "Hey man, can I get you anything? Can I prep anything for you? Do you mind if I sear that piece of fish for you?" Right? You kind of so with that work ethic, you're constantly just hitting it hard, right? And showing people that you want to learn, that you want to move forward, and then being proactive. There are cooks that I have to constantly stay on top of to make sure they're doing their job, and there are cooks that not only do their job great, but they proactively do things that are outside of their job description that needs to be done, right? So they see something that needs to be done, and they get it done, even though it's not really their problem. And those kinds of proactive individuals are the kinds of cooks that I'm looking at, saying, okay, I'm grooming you to be an up-and-coming sous chef, because that's what I need, is a hardworking, proactive individual that is serious about self-education and moving themselves forward. Let's see. Can you speak to plating? What are some basic rules one can use to make a more visually appealing piece? Hey, so I have some content on that I got to dig up. One of them was at an old culinary boot camp I did, and I'm going to possibly use that. So I'm going to save this question. Can I select in the chat room? Yeah, I can. So I'm going to save this question Java Mava, add it to my my mind map over here, and possibly play a video in the live stream next week, and we can talk about plating. But plating is a common thing that people ask about. Scriptonic. That's right. It's the beer truck theory. What will happen if the chef gets hit by a beer truck? You need someone in place that can rock it out. Absolutely. And, great kitchens are built around great sous chefs. I wouldn't be able to do the job without the people that I have. And I'm blessed to have a really talented leadership team. I got an amazing executive sous. I got an amazing sous chef. I got an amazing banquet chef. And these guys are hard workers that just kill it on a daily basis for me. So, all right. Well, hell, that was quite the marathon. I appreciate everyone hanging out during the live broadcast. You will be able to find this broadcast replayed on the Stella Culinary or YouTube channel. So youtube.com/Stella Culinary. And then eventually we're going to start turning these into audio feeds as well. So if you follow the podcast, you'll be able to download these through Stitcher, iTunes, directly to your phone, so you can listen to the podcast as you're driving around and doing your daily stuff. So thank you so much for tuning in. It's great chatting with you guys. I really appreciate all the questions and all the interactions. And we will do this again next Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern, or 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's negative 8 GMT, whatever the hell that means. Some of them are out there. Yep, same time, same channel next week. Same bat time, same bat place. We will make this a regular thing. My wife was asking me, she's like, why are you doing it at 9 p.m. on a Sunday night? I'm like, look, I know it's not perfect, but the most important thing I can do to build up this show, which I really love the live interaction. I mean, it's just so much fun. The most important thing I can do is be consistent. So right now, with my current crazy work schedule, 9 p.m. on a Sunday night is the only time that I can consistently say I will be able to be in front of this mic and talk with you. So save up your questions, send them in, and same bat time, same bat place. Thanks again for tuning in. I really do appreciate everyone and all your support. Have a good one. Bye. See you next week.